Revelers, this is Off the Rails, Right versus Left, the podcast that we do because we think the left is evil. I'm Rob B.
And I'm Brad Lee.
And I'm Brian G.
And we are Off the Rails, Right versus Left. Again.
All right, welcome, Revelers. We're continuing, as promised. We're continuing with our interviews going on with the elections. We're taking a look at some of the races that don't get talked about very much, and we're talking about some of the candidates that don't really get any attention. And in this one, we're talking to, if you go to look her up on Ballotpedia, it's down as DMB Montanez, but it's DMB Montanez, I believe over there by El Paso, is joining us. She's running for the U.S. House, Texas District 16, if I didn't mess anything up as I came in. So we're going to jump right into it and welcome her. DMB, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rob, for having me. How are you today?
Not too bad. You can hear me okay, right?
Yes, I can.
Okay, fantastic. So just to top it off, how is your name on the ballot when they go and see it? Because I saw there's confusion about it, and even trying to make the flyer for your arrival was kind of challenging because different sources have your name in different ways, and so that kind of makes it confusing. I want to make sure if after this the voters want to vote for you, they know exactly what they need to be looking for on the ballot.
Perfect. So the name is going to be D, a period, in parentheses, DMB, and Montanez.
Okay.
So I tell you a short story about how the name is going to appear on the ballot. I actually have to drive 9 hours all the way to the state of Texas because the state of Texas or the county were actually not trying to put my name on the ballot. They received it, they never processed it, and they came back with a lame excuse that I needed to change my name. So I am planning to do a lot of things after the elections because I really want to count those votes. What the election code states is that is the intention of the voter.
Exactly. So that might be tough. So so I would think anybody out there, make sure your name is as clear as possible if you try and run a write-in campaign, so you don't encounter any of these problems. Especially if you've got a cool nickname like DMB and you've got campaign stuff out there where you're like rocking it with your crotch rocket. I thought that picture was so cool. That's why I put it on the flyer. Because I think people forget that members of Congress, when they go to Congress, they're normal people before they get there. Well, some of them. I had an interview with somebody who was a community organizer straight out of college and now running for Congress, and I'm like, oh, I think we did that once. Anyway, so I do encourage alternative parties as a libertarian myself. If you're not a Republican, you're not a Democrat, or you get pushed out by the elite establishments, you should still run for Congress until we like break through. And I've mentioned in a few of my interviews here that I'm actually planning to do that myself in 2026. I'm going to try and get rid of Pete Sessions over here, but just make sure that your name's super clear so people can find you when it's time to cast that ballot.
Yes.
So, and if you don't know, they have made it harder and harder for alternative parties to get on the ballot. Like the Libertarian Party, we don't have a primary, we have a convention. And so they charge a ridiculous fee to us that they don't charge to Republicans and Democrats. And then you have to pay a huge fee if you want to be a write-in candidate and collect X number of signatures. So they make it as hard as possible for anybody who's not part of the duopoly to get involved.
You're correct.
So, all right. Well, hey, let's jump into some questions. I start off with this, and now I do want to warn you a little bit. You know, it is right versus left. So if I see something where I want to push back, I'm going to push back. If I like what you're saying, but I have some points or suggestions, I'm going to mention it because, hey, I'm potentially talking to a U.S. Congresswoman here. So what better opportunity to get my voice heard, even though I'm not in your constituency. It would be nice that you have my ideas heard because I think I've got some good ideas. So maybe you can take those and take a wrecking ball to the problems in Washington. So the first one is obviously we've got $35 trillion in debt. Our federal income tax revenues are about 4.3 trillion. We're paying 1 trillion towards debt. We're paying 1 trillion towards our military. That only leaves 2 trillion left for everything else. And yet our Congress keeps spending another 4 trillion. So we're actually averaging $6 trillion a year. And it's having an effect on the whole economy. So what would your solution be? What kind of legislation would you look at putting forward or supporting that might fix that?
So I'll be honest with you. The more that we continue making money, the more in bankruptcy the United States will get. I am not a firm believer of representatives actually starting to write legislation. There is a lot of legislation that can be amended. And most of the times it's just a little sentence or a little paragraph or a provision that will change a bill for it to pass on a bipartisan basis. One of the things that I will do, honestly, and I'm going to be very transparent with you, we have these boards on the administrative processes that are really worthless. I think that on the judicial system, you should go through the process. And if you don't get not the answer that you want, but what is fair and just, you can take the cases straight to court. So all these administrative judges that are just milking the system and milking the United States actually can go to work for DHS to assist with the influx of illegal immigrants or another process in our judicial system.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you save money.
Yeah, as you talk about the laws, it is important to point out in the 1980s there was 23,000 pages of federal law.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe putting forward some legislation that just says X statute is repealed would be a great way to start. X like agency that was never approved by Congress is defunded and deleted.
Yes.
That's a lot of it. I have an idea for what I think would be simple legislation. Good luck getting it passed, but also good luck to members of Congress not voting for it to explain why. Any representative or senator who votes for legislation that spends more money than we took in the previous year's revenue collection would no longer be eligible for re-election.
Mm-hmm.
That would
the
get
problem that we
pretty
have,
quick.
You know, the problem that we have is that the voters don't get educated, right? They go to the ballot because they know that they have a responsibility to vote,
Mm-hmm.
but they do not study the candidates. And then, let's say, for example, if the left go and talk at their door, and that's the only person that they hear about, whenever they go to the ballot, that's the only name that they're going to recognize.
Exactly.
So I think that the GOP does a very bad job, at least in our local community, to reaching out to the constituents. I know that there is a lot of division. They have lost a lot of precinct chairs, and they just need to reorganize again and mobilize, and then getting people out to vote. You know, and that's something that I have to say that the Democrats do very well. So I don't know if you know, but in 2022, I actually ran as a Democrat in the primaries. And I was able to get 12% of the votes from the incumbent. So that means that 12% of the voters that actually voted in that election, there were voters in total were 167. We have 523,000 registered in our county. they're not happy with how the Democratic Party is run. But the problem is that the Democratic Party is a huge machine. They have a lot of
Absolutely.
money. And once they have an elected official in that seat, they will continue to back them up even if they're not doing a good job, just because they do not want to lose that seat or the
Exactly.
possibility of losing that seat.
Yep, which is why I'm planning on challenging Sessions, who's a Republican in the primary, because I'm gonna try and knock him out in the primary. If I don't, I'm still gonna run for the seat. But like literally, I know that's a problem, so I'm already mapping out the plan to knock on 200,000 doors over the course of a year to make sure everybody saw me.
And
So
I suggest that, I highly suggest that, start early, because a lot of the candidates actually start late. In
I'm starting
2020,
as soon as the election's over.
yes, that's good. Because in 2022, like I say, on the primaries, I run on the Democratic Party for Congress. But then on the general election, I run for city council because the Democratic Party said that there were no conservatives on the Democratic Party. And they say, well, you don't have no experience in politics. And I say, well, I am a public servant. I have spent my entire career working for the federal government. So I know the federal government in and out, left, right, back and forth. And if you want me to start from the bottom, point taken. So I said, I'm going to apply for city council. And I was on the ballot for city council. Republicans, Democrats that did not vote on the primaries were able to see my name. But my goal was always Congress, because that is my expertise. And that's where I spend the majority of my career, in the federal government.
Okay, so now I do have a question, since you said that you worked in federal government.
Yes.
I think we have a problem in federal government that we have a lot of federal employees that they stopped worrying about what their job was,
Yep.
and they only try and justify their existence.
You're absolutely right.
And then you combine that where, okay, you have an agency or task force that's supposed to solve this problem. Why does the agency still exist? Obviously, it's not solving the problem. So why do we keep the agency?
Well, I give you the primary example. Back in 2003, we have Border Patrol under Department of Justice. And then after 9/11, they created the Department of Homeland Security. Well, it created a huge problem because, you cannot police yourself, right? You cannot go to the same agency that you're having the problem, and then that agency investigate themselves. So my suggestion is to get rid of the Department of Homeland Security, go back to where we were, because the government was a lot better back then than what it is now. At least, Customs and Border Protection.
Right. So and for just for law enforcement, we've got the Attorney General's Department, we've got the Department of Justice, we've got an entire prison Department of Prisons. We have the DEA office, we have TSA office, we have FBI office, we have and then even in intelligence, we have a CIA and an NSA. And
they do not speak with each other. They do not communicate with each other.
Well, and then the bigger problem for me, we're living in a new era where databases can be like filled in by everybody. I don't think there's any reason why we need federal level law enforcement when we've got law enforcement at the level that can handle things if they're able to share information across the board. And we don't need a whole agency to allow them to do that. We need one system where they can report things in so the information's communicated. And I would tie into that Customs and Border Patrol and Citizen and Immigration Services. So duplication, not just within the federal government, because like a lot of those departments replicate within the federal government, and then they're replicating what exists in the state level. The reason I put forward that like what sounds like a funny proposal is everybody in Congress seems to be solely focused on getting reelected to Congress. I tend to wonder if you made it so they have to cut the budget, how much quicker they're willing to stop spending if it means they keep their job.
Well, something that I never understood is, the president time frame is what, 8 years? Senate is 6 years, and then representatives are 2 years. Why can't we do something, the same for everybody? Because
So
in my
I do understand a little bit the reason why.
okay,
Okay. So the representatives are voted 100% by popular vote.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if the opinions of the people change quickly, the representatives can be changed quickly. Okay. The Senate is not elected the way they're supposed to be.
Mhm.
The Senate was supposed to be elected by the state houses. So if your state had a majority viewpoint, it takes into account all the little counties that kind of get missed in a statewide election, but they are represented in their state houses, and those state houses appointed the senators.
Mhm.
But it was actually a Democrat who pushed to get that changed because he didn't like the Democrats couldn't get enough Senate delegations after the Civil War.
Mhm.
So in the early 1900s, he pushed to change it, hiring like fiction writers to write big op-eds about how awful it was. So it was all dirty pool to get it changed anyways. So that should probably be turned back. And then what you have is about every 4 years,
Mhm.
the state houses cycle. And then every 6 years, the senator cycle. And they have different periods where they're appointed because they have different start dates. Okay. So then it gradually changes as states gradually change. So you don't get a total whipsaw. And then as far as the president, the term is 4 years. They can run for up to 8.
Mhm.
I question, why do we limit the president, but we don't limit anybody else? I understand the lifetime appointments to the Supreme Court. I understand. And the reason is they want them deciding on the law, not worried about their professional prospects once they get out of office. So I understand why they're lifetime appointments, and I don't have a problem with that. I didn't have a problem with it even when it was a more liberal court, and I don't have a problem with it now that it's a conservative court, because the idea is to keep them independent and not worried about what's going to happen after they get off the court.
Correct.
The president, Roosevelt, made himself a dictator for life, basically, and he died in office. And that's the reason why they changed the Constitution, because he massively abused the power of the executive branch. Now, then we get to the Senate and Congress. I'm kind of of the opinion, if after a certain number of years you can't fix the problems you promised to fix, you shouldn't be in office anymore, and you shouldn't be using your office as the bullet puppet to stay in office. So I think term limits would be really good.
Yes.
But I think the budgeting thing is a good place to start. But yeah, there should be, I think 5 terms for a congressman. That'll give you 10 years to get your problems fixed. Mm-hmm. And for the Senate, 2 terms. That's 12 years.
Yep.
So, and you'll still be able, so you'll still be able to work across presidential parties, because we do change presidential parties every 4 to 12 years. Mm-hmm. That's what happens. Yeah. But the way the systems are kind of rigged right now, like, I find the presidential election like amusing. I mean, the candidate that I would have preferred to win is Chase Oliver, but when you get into Biden and Trump, Harris and Trump, Democrats have controlled like what 12 of the last 16 years, but they blame all the problems on Trump, and that's just disingenuous on its face. And then like, they talk about all the things that Congress won't do when they started office with both houses of the Congress and the Supreme Court.
Correct.
So as long as they're following the law, and that's the thing about it's my problem with liberals. They don't do a take on the law. They read stuff into the law on the bench. They read stuff into the law that's not there, and quote unquote conservative justices follow the law. So what you get is, when you have a liberal justice, they 100% vote for what Democrats want. But when you get conservatives, the conservatives aren't always happy, because the conservative justices are going to vote for what they don't like. They're going to vote for the law, and they don't care if you like it. You know what I mean? So I mean, I think I wish that was all we had. But then again, we've got Senate members confirming judges that probably shouldn't be confirmed because they're towing a party line. So the only way to do that is to like get them out of office on a regular basis. And if you want to spend 10 years in the House and then go for 12 years in the Senate and then go on and try and become president, there you go. You've got a path.
Yeah.
If you want to devote your life to civil service, you can do it. You can start at the local level, work your way up. You can have an entire career in government, but you don't get to stay stuck in the same idea when you're not, or in the same place where you're not solving problems.
Absolutely right.
So, now, yeah, the spending is out of control. The debt's out of control. The other issue is the Federal Reserve is out of control. And the even idea that we have a part of the federal government that has no oversight should be terrifying to every American.
Part of the duties and responsibilities of the representatives, both on both sides of the House. I mean, the House and the Senate.
But they're not doing anything.
But they should.
Yeah.
See,
so
that's the reason because I'm running on transparency, accountability, justice, and oversight. Because the federal government are under Congress. Congress should be able to go to those directors in the federal government and say, request reports every 3 months, every 90 days, every 120 days, 180 days, and see if there's some progress.
Yep, and Congress has the power of the purse, so they should also have the power of oversight over the Fed. And if the Congress should be able to spur action if the Fed's being inactive, like their refusal to raise rates for such a long time, or their printing of money, because in the last 4 years, our money supply has increased by 40%, which means by default, your money is worth 40% less than it was 4 years ago.
Correct.
So even if it hasn't borne out in all the prices, that is a fact that your money's worth 40% less because they printed 40% more money. And if you take it into the stock market, if your company, you own stock in a company that has 1 million shares and they issue 400,000 more shares, but the value of the company is the same, each one is less.
Yeah.
Well, the value of the American economy didn't go up 40%. And I actually, and you're welcome to check my math. Now, if you include all the things, because the official inflation rate is a very specific basket, and it's intentionally the stuff that doesn't move as much that they monitor. Okay, but if you go across the whole economy, we're actually looking at closer to, over the last 4 years, 40-50% increase in prices. And it bears out when you look at fuel, when you look at houses, when you look at education, when you look at so it's closer to the amount of money that they printed. So if you break that down and just call it, 8 or 10% per year, our GDP growth is 2%. And that's based on dollars moving through the economy. So if the dollars only increased by 2%, but it's worth 10% less, that means the economy actually shrank 8%. Mm-hmm. So like the great example is you make $100 million worth of cars. Well, at $20,000, that's 5,000 cars. But if it goes up 40%, now that's what? 4,000 cars? So now you're making 1,000 less cars. So you need 1,000 less people producing the cars, or you need the people for producing 1,000 less cars. You're transporting 1,000 less cars. You're advertising 1,000 less cars. You're selling 1,000 less cars. You're financing 1,000 less cars. So there's a whole bunch of industries that are just getting rid of people because they're not going through the same amount of people. But it looks like those industries are still earning the same money because they're all getting the inflated amount of money as well, but it's actually less people working. So we've actually had a hidden recession going on for the last 4 years, mm-hmm. as opposed to going back to Trump, who, as a human being, I don't like him, but some of his policies were sane. But you go back to the Trump years, you had 1.2% inflation and 3.5% GDP growth. Even with the pandemic, our GDP was growing. It retracted for 1 year, but outside of that, it bounced right back and it was growing faster than inflation. So you actually had growth in the economy. That extra gain was from extra spending, and the money supply didn't increase a bunch because the Fed, let's face it, the Fed was trying to hamper him anyway.
And now they're scared, if he comes back into office, because, if he comes back, he's going to start cutting cutting throats around, and I don't blame him. The way that they have treated him, it's incredible. I have never seen. I mean, I served my country, in the military for 29 years.
Oh,
He
thank
was
you
my
for your
commander in
service.
chief. Thank you. He was my commander in chief in 2019, and how they treated the man. I mean, but you see, he's not a politician. You see,
Yeah.
he doesn't dance the kumbaya. He can think on his own. And the good thing about Trump, and
He's
people can
rich, so he's not in their pocket.
well, exactly. They cannot control him. They cannot control him. Now,
Yeah.
what I
That's
wish,
why when the Democrats say that he's a threat to democracy, what they mean is he's a threat to the Democratic Party.
yes, yes, correct.
Because 90% of bureaucrats, people that work in government, vote Democrat, contribute Democrat, and that's a fact. So
I just pray that, if he wins the election, that he gets a good, chief of staff and good staff under him that he can trust, and they can work together.
I think he's shown that he can work across the aisle, and he's been doing so well. Tulsi Gabbard joined the
Oh, she
Republican
turned.
Party.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was a Democrat.
So I think the reason why we've got a massive. Now I'm a libertarian, so I think we need to break up the two-party system anyways, because it was never intended. You go back to the early elections, there might have been two parties that were the top two vote getters, but it was different parties in every election. You had the Whigs, you had the Republican Democrats, which split up over slavery, and the Republican Party was formed to free the slaves. That is true history for people out there that don't know. Got to throw that out there because Republicans are always vilified for being racist, yet everything that's been done for civil liberties was done by the Republicans. So, but it's, I lost my train of thought. I hate when that happens. I got the side there.
Before I decided to run as a writing candidate, because I said, I really don't want to run in any of the two major parties. So I considered running independent, right? And then you cannot pay a fee. There's no such a thing. You had to get 500 signatures. And we got the signatures. The problem was that I started validating the signatures. And like some people that live in some of the cities in El Paso will put they live in El Paso, but they were living in Canutillo, they were living in another city instead of El Paso. Some of the people that live in apartment complex didn't put the apartment complex number or letter. So the state of Texas is not going to take their time to validate those, go one by one. And then I just didn't want it to risk not being on the general ballot. In 2022, 12% were not happy. I said to myself, I'm going to give the community a choice. Now, the hard part is educating the community how to write in my name on the ballot. Right.
Yep.
So that's what we've been doing.
So if you don't win it, I hope you do, because I really like the fact that I understand that you ran as a Democrat, but I can already hear that you understand the Democrat Party is
they're destroying our country. They really are.
They're running on continuing to run on problems, and if you want to run on problems, you can't fix them. Otherwise, there's no problems.
I worked for Border Patrol. I was there 21 years. I have been law enforcement for 26. And our guys, they're either leaving the force to go to another industry, or they're committing suicide because they just can't deal with inflation, problems at home. They cannot deal with mental health, and
the majority of them are men. And this isn't a knock to women, but the majority of them are men.
Yes. Only 5% is women.
Yeah. What people don't understand is men get their life is based on purpose.
Yes.
Okay. And when you tell people they can't do what they know is right, they lose their purpose. And I think that's why you're seeing that. You're seeing people leaving because the policies are removing the purpose.
Well, but the problem is on the management and the leadership, because if they have the guts and the balls, like I say, they will talk with the incumbents and tell them, this is the problem that I'm having. How can you help me, to get this solved? They should be working together.
Well, I hope if Trump's elected, he uses our million members of our military to secure our border, because we have military in 100 other countries securing their borders.
Yes.
And every country does secure their borders. I lived in Russia for 2 years. Every time a police officer heard me speak, I was asked for my documents. And if I hadn't been able to provide them, I would have been loaded up on a plane and sent back to the US like that. And that's how it is in every other country.
Correct. Except in
And
the United States.
and that's what our law says here. If you don't have
Yes.
your documents on you that prove you're legally in the country, you're supposed to be out of here.
Correct.
And there's no legal process for that.
Well, they're playing politics with immigration.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is. You know, the Border Patrol Union endorsed Trump. I mean, the union, you know, at that federal level is extremely strong. And they know that Kamala hasn't done anything for the Border Patrol. Biden hasn't done anything. They have made, you know, the agents work a lot harder than what is supposed to. You know, the laws are written. They just need to enforce them and follow them.
So, in your race, is she the incumbent?
She's the incumbent. Yes.
Okay. So I would suggest if your write-in campaign doesn't work, next time run directly against her and punch her in the mouth and then run as an independent on the ballot, not just as a write-in. That would be my suggestion.
Well, the problem in running as a write-in is, not running as an independent, is that you cannot just pay the fee. You need to get the signatures. And let's say, for example, you have 5 Democrats that they just don't want you in the ballot. They will sign that petition for you, and you think that you have 5 valid signatures, but in reality, they're not valid. And then they go to the state, and then they invalidate them, and there you are, out of the ballot.
But I'll point out to you, if you've already run in the primary and punched the Democrat in the mouth, you're going to have a huge database of voters that can sign for you.
Correct. Yes.
That's why I say go in the primary, punch them in the mouth, and run in as an independent if they push you out again.
Okay.
That's my suggestion. You've got to gain. I mean, you're gonna get the attention because you're running against the incumbent, and especially if you're gaining traction because you're actually somebody who wants to solve problems, you're gonna get traction. Because even Democrats have to admit we're not solving problems.
No, we're creating.
Yeah, exactly. So in all this, I've talked to people that I disagreed with. There's only been one interview that I ended, and that's because the guy just repeated Democrat talking points and wouldn't talk about the solutions and wouldn't talk about like the actual problems on that issue. And we can talk about it as well. He was running for a state house, so I was talking about securing the schools. And I pointed out that nobody can get into the state house with a gun, yet we can't provide the same level of security for our kids who are inarguably more valuable than a bunch of politicians.
You're right.
So, and the only thing he wanted to talk about was banning guns. And I pointed out there's 400 million guns and not 400 million shootings. So obviously it's not the guns.
People, any law enforcement officer will tell you, it doesn't matter at what level.
Yeah.
Guns do not kill people. Hands do.
Yes.
And the person does.
Well, and that's a good point, because more people are killed by hand than by gun in this country. And that's all guns. Now, more people are killed by hammers than by rifles. And that includes their assault weapons that don't exist. So they say weapons.
You know, we have the Second Amendment. Congress, if Congress is not happy with the Second Amendment, then they need to sit down at the round table and then amend it. But, you know, they're going to piss off a lot of, you know, gun carriers in the United States, you know, and then, I mean, they don't worry about a civil war. I do.
Yeah. And then the bottom line is it completely ignores the real problem, and that's people getting into these buildings and committing the shootings.
Yeah.
And they say, well, banning the guns is going to cause it. Any human being who wants a machine gun can go to any hardware store and make one.
Yeah.
And that's a fact. I'm not going to YouTube won't allow me to detail how that works, but it's possible.
I have friends that build weapons. Trust me. And they were law enforcement officers.
Yeah, so it's possible.
Have to go to a gun store. They can. I mean, whoever wants a gun or a weapon, they can get it. Especially
if you combine it with the southern border, where all of them, and then like I point out the dichotomy. Like, if you got to Congress, I'd love if you proposed a bill to end the NFA, the National Firearms Act. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is simple. What did it do when they amended it in under Reagan? They made it illegal for citizens to own machine guns, which weren't being used for violence. He was shot by pistols. Mm-hmm. So that was ridiculous to begin with. And then what happened? They said that manufacturers can't manufacture machine guns for civilians. Okay, so then the only legal machine guns are the ones before 1980. Now you have a limited supply. Anybody who has $40,000 to go spend on a machine gun can still get a machine gun. So what they did was, not only did they violate the Second Amendment by regulating, because the Second Amendment is very different. It's very specific about what the federal government cannot do, which is restrict the right to bear arms. And they violated the Equal Protection Clause under the law, because now they just made it so poor people can't have it, but rich people can. So, and then, like, you know, some of the misnomers out there about guns. If you worked for the Border Patrol and you were in the military, then you know a machine gun. Most of the machine guns don't have the 600 rounds a minute fire rate that they say. The only ones that do are the giant ones that are platform driven, that are belt fed. A personal arm, you can't even load enough clips to fire off 600 rounds if you could even pull the trigger that fast, which you can't.
Correct.
Because you cannot pull one trigger is one pull. You can't fire, or you can't pull the trigger 10 times per second.
You can put, like an M16, M4 on automatic, right? But we're talking, there's a huge difference between those weapons and a machine gun.
Now, you were military. Did you actually use your M4
auto?
or M6? Huh?
You mean auto? No.
Yeah, nobody in the military uses it on auto. It's good for scary suppressive fire in formation battles. But if you're trying to hit anything, you don't put it in fully auto because you can't control the weapon.
Correct.
So, like, it's ridiculous. So, and that's the reason why it wasn't being used for anything bad. And like, some of the
trying to take, the Democrats are trying to take the guns away from people, because if you don't have something to protect yourself, then they have full control. So you're talking about losing your freedom, and that's what the United States stands. That's why people come to the United States, because our freedom. And
I like the catchphrase. The First Amendment was our most important amendment, and I can say whatever I want, whether you like it or not. And the Second Amendment is there to make sure the government can't take that right away.
Correct, and they're trying their hardest.
So and they try and play games with the well-regulated militia. Okay, a militia does not stand at all times. They're not regulated at all times. It's civilians that have the weapons, and when the government needs you, they call up the militia and then regulate you.
Correct.
They don't get to regulate you all the time. And that's a big mispoint of how the military worked when they wrote the law, or when they wrote the amendment. But we can harden schools. Well, we don't want our kids having to go to school in a prison. I don't want people getting into my schools. And you know what? Kids aren't going to care. They're going to school.
Yep.
And unless a kid's going through, it's not hard. Kids are smart. They already have plastic backpacks. So when they throw their backpack up there, everybody can already see what's in it. And then they walk through a metal detector. That's not a big deal.
Correct. Whenever you go to a concert, whenever you go through a concert, you have to go through a metal detector. Whenever you go to Disney World, you go through a metal detector. Whenever you go to the courthouse, you go through a metal detector. Yeah. What's the difference?
So and then the biggest point on these mass shootings, they all happen in gun-free zones, and the majority of them happen in states where it's almost impossible to own a gun to begin with.
Correct.
Like, an exception would be Uvalde, but like the mass shootings in California, Illinois, these are, and then they happen in Democrat-controlled cities where they massively restricted the gun ownership. Like, criminals don't follow the law, so passing another law, that's just another law they're going to break.
Have you ever tell a kid to don't do something? What's the first thing that they do?
They go do it.
Exactly.
Well, okay, my kids didn't because they knew better, but but then that's another part of the whole criminal justice thing is, they get to go and sit, have 3 hot meals a day, do nothing except work out, play basketball, hang out, and watch TV. How's that punishment? They get free life for 5 years for committing a crime. So our criminal justice system got away from punishment.
Yes.
And cruel and unusual punishment does not mean that their punishment shouldn't be cruel. It shouldn't be beyond what they did. So if somebody forcibly rapes a 6-year-old child, oh, I shouldn't have said that full word. Hopefully YouTube won't shut it down. But if they hit the R word on a child, then their damage to that child is lifelong.
Correct.
Okay, so they should have a lifelong consequence of eternal suffering because that's what the kid gets.
Yep.
Now, if somebody stole a candy bar, they should be punished, but they shouldn't have a lifetime of suffering. That would be uncruel and unusual punishment. So it's not that punishment shouldn't be cruel. It shouldn't be cruel and unusual for what they did, and that got completely lost somewhere along the way.
I tell you, I used to work in a jail back in the early 2000s, late 1990s, and people that were in jail will tell you, I'd rather stay here inside this prison versus going outside. You know why? I don't have to work. I get free food, free bed, free lodging. I get to watch television. I get to play.
If they're on drugs, they get all the drugs they want.
Oh yeah, because they go in the system. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we got away from the deterrent factor that's supposed to be built into the criminal justice system.
Correct.
And I think that's more legislation that should specifically define. And that's some of the problem with the Constitution. It was clear to them 200 years ago what it meant, but now we're debating meaning. Okay, if we're debating meaning, let's define the meaning. Correct. That's the kind of legislation I like to see. Okay, so we're going to clearly define cruel and unusual. You cannot suffer more than the victim of your crime. Mm-hmm. There we go. So what limit does that leave on somebody that committed murder? Well, the limit's pretty clear. They can go up to death. Yep. Although, as a libertarian, I don't know about the state killing people, but,
yeah.
Still.
Well, whenever you have representatives, 2-year, maybe 3 terms. 3 terms to me, is fair, and you can do a lot on 3 terms. But they are only there for 2 years before re-election, and then they spend the majority of those 2 years
trying to get reelected.
Correct. Fundraising, events, networking, so they can get elected again.
Yep. And when I'm in Congress, I'm going to there's plenty of time that Congress isn't in session. It's all that time that I'm going to work on expanding my base. And every single day, I'm going to be promoting legislation that focuses on restoring liberty and reducing spending, because the government doesn't have a right to people's money. And this is something that, it's a concept that I don't understand. So, and every single day, I'll be sending the people that sent me there, hey, this is an update. This is what we're trying to do today. This is what we're trying to do today. This is what we're trying to do today. So I'm going to hold on to the people that supported me in the first part. And then when I am in my home district, I'm going to be going out there and finding new people to support me the next time. But when I'm in Congress, I'm going to be doing my job in Congress, which I don't think our congressional members do. And but again, vote to spend more money than we're taking in.
Well, because they keep producing more money.
Yep.
They keep printing it.
Yep. They keep printing it. They keep borrowing it. And the bottom line is they just shouldn't be able to, if you're massively in debt, if the federal government was a company, they would have gone bankrupt a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And the federal government would have ordered them to sell their assets.
Yep.
So the problem is the people with the power of the purse are trying to get reelected. So they put up pet districts. Explain to me why the rest of the country has to pay for a bridge in Alaska.
Right.
It explained to me, Texas is a huge state. Great. Why is the federal government paying for federal roads to go, or paying for interstates going through the road? Okay, we built it. You maintain it. Mm-hmm. That should not be a problem.
The government, they put it on the budget. Yeah.
Yeah. And some of these projects, there's oh, great, we're allocating federal funds. Yeah, that's still our funds.
Yes, it's taxpayers' money.
Yeah, so why doesn't the state do it where they can monitor at a closer level? Because I can tell you here, all the work on the freeways, well, you're in Texas too. All the work on the freeways takes forever. But when they decide to build a new city street, it's done in a few months.
Yep.
So it just becomes a waste. And then all the corruption that went on with the widening of the I-10 corridor here by Houston, it's just insane.
Well, there's construction everywhere that you go around El Paso.
I just drove through El Paso, and I forgot how much of the El Paso border is on the Mexico border. So I was literally just there last week. My mom's in the hospital over in
I know you told me that.
yeah, she's over in Arizona. So I was driving back from Tucson. So I drove all the way across El Paso. So like I saw all of that. I love the fact that the border checkpoint's 100 miles into Texas. So that makes it real hard to skirt. Especially since it's like right in the middle of hills where if they just go around this hill, they got around the checkpoint.
Yep.
Yeah, so like I mean, we don't have common sense like across. We need to restore common sense to government.
We're very reactive. The
Mhm.
United States is very reactive instead of being proactive. In the
Yeah.
military, you learn about lessons learned. I don't think that the government have it together. I really
Yeah.
don't.
Well, and to the point, the guy that I interviewed that was a community organizer, he's never done anything in life. When the only thing you do is try and get money from government, you've never actually done anything. So, and
Some of the
and
people
even
that run for election, it just blows my mind. Like you look at their background. Like I am not a politician, but I'm a public servant. I work for the two largest government agencies, and they're the ones that are destroying our nation.
my congressional representative is a great example. He did such a bad job. Colin Allred took his seat, so he just moved to Waco and ran for a seat that was being vacated. He's been out of office 2 out of the last 29 years. And when you look at his list of legislative accomplishments, stuff that became law, renaming post offices. So we spent money to put a plaque on a post office that's not part of the federal government. Yeah, well, and the post office isn't supposed to be part of the federal government anymore. And then commemorative coins for the Boy Scouts. If the Boy Scouts want to issue a commemorative coin, they can. It's got nothing to do with the U.S. government.
Correct.
So that's ridiculous. So yeah, it's like kind of crazy. And he like, oh yeah, I've sponsored or co-sponsored a bunch of bills, but none of them actually help Texas. All
and
they do
most
is
of them they don't even pass. I mean, like I look at the history on sponsor bills on my incumbent. There are very few. I think that there's only one that passed, and it has something to do with the Indian reservation, which is great that she did. But I mean, what about the rest of the community? I mean, what about the veterans? What about the first responders?
So I'm gonna throw out here a wild and crazy proposal.
Okay.
So we've got the Bureau of Land Management that controls millions of acres in our country. The federal government doesn't have any right to any land in the country.
Correct.
So how about we get rid of the Bureau of Land Management and turn all the land over to the Native American tribes indigenous to the areas where they stole the land?
Some of these departments and agencies, they shouldn't exist. They just
but
create jobs.
But that one there, we get rid of expenses.
Yeah.
We return land to the native tribes.
The people. Yeah.
And they're going to maintain their land because they always cared more about the land than the Europeans did.
Yes.
And we need to all face it. Like, you're Hispanic, obviously.
Yes.
Which by definition means you're part native, part European. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think that would be a good way of.
That would be a great idea. I mean, it's just that you have, 434 more representatives that you have to convince.
Yeah.
But, through conversations, that can be done.
Well, so this proposal. So if you get into office, take this one with you.
Okay.
Because here's the argument. Republicans, I'm getting rid of an entire government agency and their $1.9 billion budget. Mm-hmm. Democrats, I'm restoring the native lands to the Native Americans. Mm-hmm. Who's going to fight me?
Nobody should.
You get what I'm saying? Yeah. So, hold on. Give me 1 second. Yeah. Sorry, my puppy thinks he needs to be out here when I'm out here in the studio. And when he decides to go to the bathroom, he doesn't necessarily wait for breaks in the streaming, especially when by the end of this, I'll have been going for like 3 hours. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So he had to go.
Yeah.
So anyway, but no, that's a good example because you can get stuff done where neither side can argue with it. Oh, you're a Democrat and you're going to vote against returning native land to native people. Oh, you're a Republican and you're going to vote against cutting the $1.9 billion in spending.
Well, I tell you, God willing, I get to Congress and I will look at everything that our community have asked her and she has not done and see how can we start working on it. because it's not rocket scientist, you know. It shouldn't be that difficult to be a congressperson. It's 435 people putting their heads together, to make a decision, and then, pass it on a bipartisan form.
So can I tell you, you don't sound like, I know you ran for a Democrat seat.
Mm-hmm.
You don't sound like a Democrat, but you don't sound like a Republican either. You sound like a libertarian.
Well, I tell you, the libertarian spoke to me to run as a libertarian. And the problem that I have, and I did consider it, but the problem was, I'm very faithful and I'm very loyal. I have always been. And I was worrying about the 12% of the Democrats that voted for me in 2022 because I didn't want them to think that I was backstabbing them, because I am not.
Okay,
And I was not.
but are you backstabbing them, or is the Democratic Party backstabbing them?
Well, it's the Democratic Party, but the uneducated voter put the blame on the candidate. They don't put it on their political party because they're affiliated with them.
So like I said, you can run as independent, but the duopoly of Republican and Democrat, and I can clearly see you don't agree with the BS that the Democrat.
No,
now, we didn't get into like transes and sports, but just from your personality, I'm pretty sure I can guess what your answer is.
Yep.
Yeah. So thank God the Supreme Court just threw out the rewriting of Title IX.
God. Yes.
So, but and at the same time, you're not saying that somebody doesn't have a right to live however they want. If you want to go and dress like a woman and live your life as a woman, but you're born a man, more power to you.
Sure.
You don't have a right to talk to children about it.
Correct.
And nobody else has to acknowledge this.
Correct.
But at the same time, it is a body dysmorphia, which is by definition not seeing your body the way it is in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Anorexia, bulimia, gender dysphoria.
Mm-hmm.
So offering surgeries to somebody that's got gender dysphoria would be like prescribing diet pills to somebody that's anorexic or bulimic. Mm-hmm. It's insane to me.
Well, and then they want the taxpayers to pay for it.
Oh, and Democrats are all for it because that's more spending.
Correct.
So yeah, you're definitely not a Democrat, and that is part of the problem. When you're campaigning, Democrats don't represent most people, and that's what you got to convince the voters of. Mm-hmm. Because maybe those Democrat voters shouldn't be voting for Democrats.
Correct. And that's the argument. Most of them are conservatives. A lot of our Hispanic community, they're actually conservatives, but the only ones knocking at their door are Democrats. Yeah. They brainwash their skull, like I said.
So for me to take a shot at the Republican Party makes a lot of sense for me, because fiscal conservative, but I actually want to do it. I don't want to just spend money my way. I actually want the fiscal conservatism, which is what Republicans say they want, but they never really do. Right. On the social aspect, like, I'm all about freedom, but that also means freedom from putting government's morality onto people. Mm-hmm. So, and there's not that much of a tightrope walk to me, because what is liberty? You are free to do whatever you want as long as it doesn't impact the right of somebody else.
Correct.
So, and that's where the Republican Party isn't going to like me, because I don't think drugs should be criminalized if you're doing them in your own house. But if you go outside high, mm-hmm. then you can be punished.
Correct.
You get what I'm saying? And then again, that opens the tax revenue for people that want to engage in bad behavior. We can't argue that we don't do that, because we already tax the hell out of tobacco and alcohol. Mm-hmm. So apparently we're okay with that. So there we go. And then 50% of those proceeds should go directly for drug rehab and treatment. Mm-hmm. There we go.
And then the problem is that we only have the two major parties, yeah. and we have to change. We have to educate the community, but that takes time. That takes a lot of money.
Yep. Well, yeah, you probably got to work a full-time job. So yes. I have the wonderful benefit that, like, that's not where I am in my life anymore. Like, I take care of my soon-to-be stepson, mm-hmm. and I do my podcasting and streaming. And if I need a little extra cash, I'll go do some gig work. Mm-hmm. But that's the freedom I have. And not everybody has that. But yeah, it really does like need to be pounded down on people that you don't have to vote Republican, Democrat. It was never intended to be Republican, Democrat.
Well, I tell you, we have we have three candidates that they are going door to door, convincing people to vote up and down the ballot Democrat, which is ridiculous. You know,
Hmm.
if the person is not suitable to be in office, they shouldn't be elected. It doesn't
Absolutely.
matter what party they belong to.
Anthony Weiner, doesn't matter which party he's a part of, but everybody knew about it. Joe Biden, everybody in Delaware knew he was corrupt, and yet he rode that party all the way up to the highest office in the land. You know, and that's actually, and you look all across it, like Nancy Pelosi, she's been in government forever, and she on a $200,000 a year salary, she's risen to a net worth of 140 million.
Mhm.
If that doesn't tell you that you can't vote up and down the party right off the bat, it's clear. Joe Biden, like, he even told people in interviews back in the 80s, don't assume I'm not corrupt. And they laughed about it when he admitted he was corrupt.
Yep.
So, and then the restoration of free speech, that's like, that's another issue for me. Like, I think that any agency that purports themselves to be news
Mhm.
cannot editorialize. And if you editorialize, you can't purport yourself to be news.
Mhm.
And in social media, if you censor anything that is not a direct violation of the law, you're an
Well,
editor.
conservatives,
You're
yeah,
an editor.
conservatives.
You're an editor, not a utility, and you're not exempt from lawsuits.
Mhm.
But if you're allowing free speech, as long as it's not illegal, because there are some speech that's illegal, you can't make direct threats. You can't make specific threats.
Mhm.
You can't do the child pornography. All that stuff's illegal, and they should be pulling that. Okay, but their resources shouldn't go towards making algorithms that tune a message as speech or censoring stuff that they think is false, because they're claiming that they're a platform. So if you're like, if I'm posting on social media something that the president of my electric company doesn't like, he can't shut off my electricity. That's a utility. And social media companies have the protection of a utility, but they're not acting like a utility. They're acting like an editor. And if you're acting like a utility, you don't have First Amendment rights.
Correct.
So that needs to be corrected as well.
Well, a lot of
And then,
conservatives are being censored. You know, everything is marked as misinformation. You
oh,
know, that's
but it's all, even the Republicans, it's all Google. The TikTok thing, you get both sides on board for it. We're going to ban TikTok because they're collecting this information. No company should be collecting this information. Don't try and single out a company that is owned by a company in Singapore that CEO is Singaporean, not Chinese, and it's racist for both sides to act like that's Chinese, because it's not. Yeah, they have a stakeholder in what is it? The Chinese company has a big stake in it, but the China has a big stake in our government debt. Does that mean the government is a Chinese enterprise? No.
right.
So it's all fake. And if they really wanted to fix it, they would just make it illegal to collect the information. Oh, but then they got a bunch of money from companies that sell the information, so they're not going to do that. So yeah, it's all dirty pool, and that's yeah, campaign finance. Nobody but an individual private citizen should be able to donate to a candidate, and that would level things out really quick.
Correct.
And like, yeah, companies, you get exemption from certain laws by registering as a corporation. I think you lose some things too, including your First Amendment right.
Mhm.
As a person, you can speak. As a company, you cannot.
Correct.
And so as a person, you can spend your money. You can't go around that by being a company. The last thing, we've been going for quite a while here. So the last thing I want to touch on is government funding of non-government organizations.
Oh, we can talk about that forever.
Yeah, well, so I don't want to make it too long, but this is my observation.
Mhm.
The government offers grants to non-government organizations they know are violating the law.
Correct. It happens here.
Okay, so if they're wouldn't it be non-government organizations should not be able to get any government money, or they're not a non-government organization?
So non-government organizations are non-profits. That's how I would put it. Grants
Yeah,
should be
well,
going to non-profit organizations, and they should be using the money for what the mission is, not for salaries and overhead.
I don't think government money should go to anything private. So whether it's a nonprofit organization, the Red Cross is great, and I wish them the best of luck. The government shouldn't be giving them money. You get what I'm saying? And now we've got the government giving money to NGOs that are specifically facilitating illegal immigration.
Correct.
We've got a government giving money to NGOs that are putting up housing for illegal immigration.
Yes.
That's the biggest point. But you also have got non-government organizations bailing people out of jail for violent crimes that are funded by the government.
Correct.
So if you're a non-government organization, that means all your money has to be non-government too.
Correct.
So and then I would also say anytime an organization contributes to a political cause, they need to publicize the entire list of where all their money came from.
Yes.
So if you want companies to donate, great, companies can donate, but they have to be clear about where every dollar comes from.
Well, the way that they have it now is that if they are if they are private foundations, they have to say the corporation that donated or the person that donated. But if they are private foundations, they don't have to. They should change that. Yeah.
They should all have to disclose everything about their finances.
And I know that the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, is actually suing, I believe, the state, or is it it's not Anedot, Act Blue, I think it is.
Yeah, Act Blue that are doing fraudulent donations.
Yes.
Yeah, so that one to me, obvious campaign finance. And the FBI, again, should be investigating that.
Well, they're not doing it. I have there's a candidate that I'm running against at the GOP. She created a super PAC. She told everybody that she was not running for Congress. And then once she filed, she took all the money from the super PAC and moved it over to the campaign. And the FBI hasn't done anything. And she's still running for office.
All dirty pool.
Yeah.
But then that's a donation from a super PAC.
Yeah, but super PACs should not be donating to, especially if she is the president of the super PAC and she is a candidate for that position.
Yeah. Oh no, I get the dirty pool. Yeah. So and I mean I think super PACs should be like eliminated completely.
Yes.
Because they're just. But again, if we are detailed about where money comes from.
Yeah.
And not allowing if we're not allowing the filtering through many sources.
Correct.
Because it took 20 years for people to realize that Soros was funding all these DAs.
It shouldn't have taken that long.
Yeah, but nobody was investigating it. So I would say let's get rid of the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, the U.S. Marshals. Let's get rid of all of them. We can keep about 10% of the population that their only job is to investigate potential violations of federal law and refer it to the local agencies to arrest the people that are doing it and prosecute them.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, we have more agencies that we can count with two hands. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, officially there's 230 organizations, but I compiled a list once upon a time where it's over 5,000 agencies. You've got 500 members of Congress. They cannot oversee 5,000 agencies. So, I mean, the biggest problem is the executive branch is supposed to be an equal part of government, and they're not. But it's Congress's fault because they keep funding it.
Yes.
So, anyway, well, it was a great conversation. Whether you win or not, I hope you'll come back on the show and talk more. You're fun to talk to.
Of course. Thank you.
I was actually kind of surprised seeing that you had ran for Democrat offices before. I'm actually surprised how much common ground we have. But again, I think that's because you're not actually a Democrat.
No.
You're.
Well, this is a Democratic town, and
but that's the point. Right. We have to break that.
Yes.
Because nothing's going to change if we keep with the status quo.
Correct.
And I think getting out there and saying, hey, well, I'm either independent or I'm libertarian, or, you know, like, I mean, the reality is if we didn't have this duopoly going on, probably half of the, if not 3/4 of the Democrat Party right now would be part of the Socialist Party if they were honest.
Well, if they win, that's exactly where
So,
we're headed.
and then the crazy stuff that you hear, like them calling Nazis far right. Nazis were Marxist, which was left.
Yes.
So the only difference between Marxism and socialism is whether the government owns stuff and tells everybody what to do, or whether private enterprise owns stuff and the government tells the private enterprises what to do.
Correct.
That's the only difference.
They say that they're, you know, right extremists. No, they're left extremists too. They're on both sides.
Yeah, well, but if you go to the right, what does the right want? Well, you get Republicans, they say lower taxes, lower government involvement, blah, blah, blah. Most of it's lip service. They're actually closer to the middle where they want to spend the money. They just want to spend the money for their stuff. You go further right than that, you got libertarians who are like shrink government to the bare minimum because that's what the Constitution was set up for, was a bare minimalist federal government, because we're a conglomeration of independent states that are supposed to be taking care of their people. And then you go further right than that, what do you get? You don't get absolute government control. You get no government. So far right would be anarchist, not fascist. So like that whole dichotomy is like, and both sides do it, and they don't clearly delineate. Like, we're not promoting anarchy. We're promoting the states have the sovereignty that they were intended to have and did have up until the Civil War. That's what the Civil War was actually fought over. But then like we get into like reparations, you know, what's more valuable, life or money? Life, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, 600,000 lives of white people were sacrificed to ensure the slavery ended. So I think that debt has been paid already, but everybody who was a slave was offered the 40 acres and a mule. They didn't take it because they wanted to stay on the plantations where they were working and get paid. That was their choice.
Yes.
And then now, like, the conversation out of hand should be like completely dismissed, because now you're talking about punishing people that didn't own slaves and giving the money to people that were never slaves over violations of their rights that nobody committed against people who it wasn't committed against. So, and if you really wanted to talk reparations, you should be going and talking to all the descendants of the kings in Africa and tribal chiefs in Africa that were taking these slaves and selling them. Because you didn't see a bunch of white folks running around the plains of Africa capturing black people. That's not what happened.
Well, one of the problems that we have, especially in schools, you know, they don't teach politics. They don't take, you know, or what is it? They don't teach the Constitution. They don't teach history anymore. They took all that out of the curriculum.
Oh yeah, you never hear now that when the country was founded, the agreement was that after X number of years, slaves could no longer be imported to the United States, and it went into effect under Thomas Jefferson. The transatlantic slave trade ended in the U.S. before the British ended the transatlantic slave trade. So,
but if you ask the kids nowadays, they don't know.
Yeah, they don't know. Well, I mean, they don't know that the presidential candidate for the Democratic Party, her father's or her great-grandfather was the largest slave owner in the Caribbean. And she's running against a guy whose family never owned slaves. Because up until Fred Trump, they were impoverished.
It's crazy.
It seems weird. So now that being said, I'm a libertarian. I voted yesterday.
Well, I mean, I know a lot of libertarians that vote Republicans, you know, because they know that, you know, the libertarian candidate is not going to win, you know, because it's a small party, right? But I feel like people should vote where they belong, you know, like
Exactly.
the Democrats told me, you know, you're not a Democrat, right? Because I'm pro-life with just a very, very limited exceptions. So I listened to them, and I didn't run as a Democrat.
So
you know, they're the ones that push me out.
Yeah, and that's why I say you shouldn't be afraid to worry about like betraying your supporters, because you're not betraying your supporters. You're turning your back, because like all of the Democrat icons, except for maybe Roosevelt, like the Kennedys, now they would be Republicans.
Yep.
And the few good Democrats aren't going to change the apparatus.
Correct.
What they need to do is starve it for support, and unless you get out of it, you can't.
Yes.
So, anyways, we went a little over an hour. So sorry if I took out a ton of your time. I know you're out there probably like still knocking doors and still greeting people at the balloting places.
I actually go to the ballot centers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I understand that. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. I think it was great conversation. I think you've got a great candidate for the U.S. House District 16. When you write in that name, it's D.DMB Montanez, right? Parentheses around the DMB. Hold on. I'm gonna fix this so they can see it exactly how it needs to be written.
And I have asked some of the voters that already voted, and they stated that they actually have. Whenever they vote for the writing candidate, there's a keyboard that pop up on the screen, and then people actually, the names are there. So actually, not quotation marks. I'm sorry, not parentheses.
Yeah. So if you want to vote for her, I mean, she sounds like she's what the Democrat Party used to stand for, which is liberty for the people, your freedoms, and she's not buying into the Democratic sanity of steal all your money and tell you how to live. No. So, although she ran as a Democrat before, she's clearly not a Democrat. Right. She's independent for sure. And that means when she gets there, she's not beholden to what a party wants. She's going to go and she's going to vote what's in the best interest of the people of Texas District 16 and the state of Texas and the country. So I think she might be a good option for a candidate over there. I've got no horse in the race because I'm over here in what is it, District 18, I think. I don't know. I'm over here in Pete Sessons' district, so I don't get a vote for her. But I do appreciate that you came on, had this conversation. I hope people get a chance to watch your video. Make sure you share the link, go on YouTube after we're done and share the link, because I will tell you, because I say things that the establishment doesn't like, YouTube does have me algorithmically challenged. I am getting views on the other platforms, but that's the easiest one to access. So go ahead and share that out there. We do appreciate you coming on. And good luck with the election. I know you got a lot of work to do the next 2 weeks.
Yes, thank you so much. Just make sure that instead of parentheses, just put quotations.
Hold on. DMB. Yeah. Okay, we'll fix that. We want it to be exactly how you have it.
Yeah. And like I say, the election code states that it's the intent of the voter. But you know how corrupted our government is.
Yeah, and most of the poll workers are
there you go.
Are liberals, because let's face it, liberals are the only ones getting free government benefits, so they don't have to go to work.
Correct.
So,
they don't want to work.
Yeah, they don't want to work. So
they want everything free.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for having it.
I appreciate you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you again after the election, win, lose, or draw. I hope we can follow up and have some more conversations, because it was great talking to you. I'd like to, when it's not in the terms of election, I'd like to know more about what you got going on with your work with the Border Patrol and all of that. And then if you do get elected to office, I want to talk to you about what you're doing while you're there in the House, and the reception that you're getting, because they're going to be pissed if you win.
Yes, very pissed.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Yep, you have a good one, DMB. Thank you again for joining us. Now, Revelers, we do have another interview coming up later tonight. It's going to be about 7 p.m. With Jim Steele. He's a candidate for the Round Rock Independent School District. Let's see, make sure I've got the exact one here. So he's James Steele. I don't know his party. I haven't been able to find a lot about him, so I'm actually really glad that he's going to come and talk to me. But I don't have a lot of information about him. He is running for the Round Rock Independent School District, Texas, place number 7. So we'll see what he's got to say about what they're doing on the school district board. And I'm kind of interested to see what kind of approaches he wants to take with the state wresting away more control away from the school districts. So I really do look forward to talking to him. Thank you guys again for watching and for joining us. Again, we'll be back later with more interviews. And I think it's been pretty productive and it's been a lot of fun. So I hope you guys are enjoying it too.